In this episode, I am walking back to the narration of or a revisit to how I played host to two of the very important visitors to the Cess during my tenure in Cess, Trivandrum. Among these, one gentleman is Dr. Varadan, who was then working, then in the sense in that time during my tenure, say for example in the early 80s, working as a Deputy Director General of the Geological Survey of India. And of course, the director, Karnakaran sir, can invite anyone to come over to Cess and for a tour of the organization, and also to contribute to the activities, how the activities can be expanded, how the activities can be refashioned, how the activities can be redirected for the benefit of the state. So this gentleman was here in Trivandrum in this Cess as a guest for 2 days. So what happens usually is there will be a discussion with the heads of divisions on the afternoon of the landing of this visitor. And then, the discussion can go on, depending on how we all contribute to the discussions. And then there will be, on the next day, a meeting or a seminar by the visiting scientist who will address the scientific community, working under Cess, belonging to all the divisions. And that will go on at the best for about an hour, followed by 10 or 15 minutes of discussion. Most of the time, what happens is, at the end of the seminar, like it happens today, there will be very few comments, observations, and questions toward posed toward the theme that was presented by the visiting dignitary or whoever. So on both days in the evening, my job was to take this gentleman, whoever the guest is, around, show Trivandrum and talk about Trivandrum and, the import. So what I did was, the first day in the evening, around 5 o'clock, I took one of those cars from the Cess and, both of us, Dr. Varadan and I, boarded the car and then went down to Kolam. Of course, for Thrivikramji, anybody who is coming from the north or outside of Kerala, our prestige and presentable landscape and tourist point is Kolam only. It is a beachside tourism location. There are, those days it was not as big as today, and very compared to the tourist visits happens today in the 21st century. Those days the number of tourists were very few, and we reached, like close to sunset. The traffic was very tough. The roads were very narrow, and think of 80s, how the roads in India were, etc. Trivandrum is no exception. Much more hard. But only thing is the traffic, vehicle density will be lower. Then we just walked around the beach, what I call as the ITDC beach those days. Now these days we can call it Ravipilla beach, because it is sold to Ravipilla anyway, including the palace. Then we, after the visit to the beach, and then we walked up the hill to the Kovalam Palace. And we just circled around the Kovalam Palace. At the same time, we asked the car to go up and wait for us in the parking of the Kovalam Palace. Of course, the driver was given money to have his dinner there. Then what we did from the Kovalam Palace, we generally strolled down to the government guest house and ordered dinner for two of us. We had a good dinner. In other words, a dinner in a hotel will be always appreciated more by the women folk than by men folk, because women folk will get a chance to eat a good dinner without sweating, breaking even a single drop of sweat or any preparation. But of course, during this special time, we were talking about what I have been doing and what Varadan was doing in the GSI. As far as I can recall, he was one of the well-known engineering geologists in the country those days. And then, by about 9 o'clock or 8:30, we departed from Kovalam, and I dropped him in the Masket Hotel, and I headed then to my home in Shastamangalam. And, obviously the next day, the car went down with the driver only to the hostel and brought over this gentleman to Cess. And on that day, it was the second day of the visit, and by around 3 o'clock, I boarded the car. Both of us boarded the car, and we went to Nayar Dam. There is a garden in Nayar Dam. Even today it is there, but those days it was better looking, even during summertime, because, the people engaged as gardeners were, working hard. These days, nobody works hard. Even, everybody works hard to make money or, keep the job, because nobody works, let us not go into that. It is a personal choice of people. Nobody, I will say yet, feels proud about what his contribution is or about. And then, of course, we walked around and we saw the reservoir from the road at the top of the dam. It is Nayar Dam is actually one of the closest ones to Trivandrum. It is in the Nayar River in a village called Karlikada, and on our first thing we did was when I reached there, I told that there will be two people for dinner that evening. So the caretaker said, "Okay, sir, it will be ready by 7." So by 7 o'clock, we came back to the guest house, government guest house again, and had discussions about why the dam is there, what is the purpose, what is the water doing, and so on and so forth, etc. And then, after dinner, we boarded the car and came back to Trivandrum. I left Mr. Varadan in the basket and then headed home. So, the third day, of course, it is the day of departure, and I had nothing to do with the arrangement of the departure, etc. A car will obviously go and take this guest over to the airport. And I did not know why this man was brought in. I can only make a guess. In other words, Karnakaran sir wanted somebody to fill in the hierarchy as a deputy director. So, in the year 1982, in the first quarter, we had another guest, Dr Harsh Gupta, who is still around and sitting as the president of the Geological Society of India. He studied in Indian School of Mines, applied geophysics, when Dr Rajendran Nair of University of Kerala was doing his applied geology in Indian School of Mines. Well, I'm not sure whether, how well they knew each other. Anyway, because in two different disciplines. Anyway, Harsh Gupta, later on went on for doing a PhD, and then after PhD or during PhD, he was in the National Geophysical Research Institute in Hyderabad, one of the flagship organizations in geophysics, and I think the ship is now standstill. That's what I should say. When you look at what they did for the country or science, they did that. These scientists there published a lot of papers. That's fine, no problem. How did this publication add to the future of science in the country, and how it helped the country in progressing ahead is a vexing question. Like most of our research institutions in the country are, I would sum up that in advance. All the research institutions serve their staff very well, exceedingly well. So there comes Harsh Gupta, I think in the first quarter of 1982, and he's a man of not a big build, average built Indian with a lighter skin tone, and he is when he came down to Toronto, he already actually had a book authored by him and published through the Elsevier publishing company, and it is about the induced seismicity or reservoir induced seismicity. That is the title of the paper. That was one of the hot topics in the field of geoscience or geophysics or applied geophysics those days. India had also a lot of large dams and reservoirs and so on and so forth. So, Harsh Gupta landed on an invitation from the institution and extended by the director. He landed in Trivandrum in the Cess. He was here for 2 days. On those 2 days also, I did this very same thing. Engaging him in the evenings of the both days. And first day we made a trip to Kovalam, and the second day we made a trip to, the dam area, and we had a dinner like in guest houses in Kovalam as well as in Nayar Dam. And during the office hours, what Harsh Gupta did was he had met all our heads of divisions in the presence of director in the director's chamber, and then individually, and kind of know each other, and not only know each other personally but also academically also, and what about the research that is at hand and what are the plans for the next years. Well, when I talk about the plan for next years, there was a very interesting event that happened in 1981 when I joined. In 1981, toward the end of 1981, there was a executive committee meeting of the Cess, and the director, a fellow of the Center for Development Studies, Dr. K.N. Raj, quite unusually made a suggestion that this institute called the Center for Science Studies should come up with a 5-year research program which will be relevant to state of Kerala. And hence the executive committee did not approve the program of work that just envisioned for the next financial year. So the director was actually wild at this suggestion, because he never expected anybody to come up with a suggestion like this. And he took it for granted that whatever proposal that the rector brings over to the executive committee will be passed with clapping of both hands. So the day after the executive meeting, there was an emergency meeting of the heads of divisions called in. And there was a narration of what happened in the meeting. And in fact, I can tell you very frankly, he was disgusted and ferocious about this suggestion. And I'm not sure whether he called names, but tangentially, yes, I would guess so. Because, the words he chose to express what happened in this meeting really gave a message that, things did not go well in the executive meeting. So then we were asked to make a plan for the next 5 years, and the plan has to be ready within 5 working days. Well, of course, it was no problem for me because, as a head of the division, or not only a problem for me, but others also. But only advantage MSD has is MSD is more close to what is called the society than the GSD or the atmospheric sciences division. Because, what GSD does is, what is the petrology, petrogenesis, and etc., of granites or other plutons in the state. So it is in no way affecting or influencing what is called the life of the people. Atmospheric sciences are designing some small device that will be sent up to the lower atmosphere by a ISR rocket, Rohini rocket actually. That will be fired off once a while from the Tumba Equatorial Rocket Launching Station. RAD is better placed in the sense they can at least say that we are working on what is called the first ever resource atlas of Kerala, a pioneering piece of work. And so, I went down after the meeting, and it was like 4:30 in the evening, and then I said, immediately called Baba and told Baba, we want a program for next 5 years, what you do, how you do, where you do, etc. Because unless this is given, the executive committee will not pass the annual program, which is actually connected to budget, etc., etc. Okay, anyway, not the salary of the component of the budget, but the research funding provided or asked for in the budget. Anyway, for the next, called my friends in the MSD and told this is what we have to do. Think very hard about what we can do, and let us meet tomorrow morning around when you're all here. So that is what happened, and we did a wonderful work. We wrote up at least, after typing, our 5-year program, filled us maybe something like 10 to 15 pages. In a landscape mode, we typed our programs, identified the programs on the lakes in the offshore region and littoral waters of Kerala, territorial waters of Kerala rather, about the lagoons in Kerala, about the sediment chemistry, and what the sediment are going to tell about the future of the whatever we call the shoreline, fluctuating shoreline, severely eroding and shoreline of Kerala on an annual basis, etc., etc. And when the final draft was made, it was given over to director, and of course director, as usual, he will mark it to his technical secretary, P.K. Thambi. P.K. Thambi will go through this and will say, sir, it is all okay. So finally, the executive committee met, I think somewhere along in the January or February, and then it was passed. So then, now going back to Harsh Gupta. Well, Harsh Gupta was, I said, I accompanied him on the tour in the Trivandrum city and neighborhood on both evenings. And then I was, when we were talking over our dinner, I said, when you join here as a deputy director, Thrivikramji will be back in the University of Kerala. Then he wondered, why are you going back? I said, well, that is a better place to work than the Center for Earth Science Studies. So that is my inference after working here for almost 18 months. So he said, well, think about it, etc., etc. Then what had happened was, when I left, I was given a send-off, no doubt about it. And the send-off happened on the roof of this Shastamangalam Cess building. And, everybody was, talking high about, me, what I did not do, etc. And Karnagaran sir also spoke for 5 minutes. And I had replied to the toast expressed there. And then around 5 o'clock, 4:45 rather, I just walked out of the building with my whatever little possession I had to carry along with me to my home. I just walked back to my home because I did not take the scooter. Many on occasions, I will put the scooter back in my home when I go for lunch. So that is how the tenure in Cess came to a conclusion. In the next episode, what I will do is, my plan, as soon as I landed, plan means a research plan, as soon as I landed back in the Department of Geology of the University of Kerala. You will see then